visionary in youth leadership training, an expert in curriculum development, a mom, a CEO, a Jack Welch devotee, Deborah Kenney.
I didn't know there was going to be music. That freaked me out a bit. Okay. So the mom you saw in the video is just like so many mothers, us and the mothers in Harlem. She wants her children to be happy and to get a great education. And the difference is, though, for us, we are privileged to be able to choose a school. Well, she was not. And so when she came to our school, this mom said to me, on the very first day, could I please meet with you? I know you're busy, it's the first day, could I please meet with you? I said, of course. We sat down. She started immediately crying. She said, they've told me that my baby can't learn. They've told me that I shouldn't expect her to graduate from high school. And fast forward into the spring of that first year, her 5th grade daughter, who was at a 1st grade reading level, who couldn't add or subtract automatically, who didn't know her times tables, had jumped so far ahead. And she came to meet with me again in the spring, and she said, I don't understand. I was told that she had some kind of disability. I was told she can't learn. I said to her, what your daughter had was what I call PTS, poor teacher syndrome. And, you know, this mother, sadly, and so many other mothers and fathers in our country are desperate for what should be a basic human right, a quality education for their children. And all these years and all these decades, education reform hasn't really blossomed in the way it didn't blossom the way it did in the last 10 years. Why? Because we blamed the parents or we blamed poverty. But thank goodness in the last 10 years, education reform has come a really long way. Before I talk about the topic of today, which is reforming education reform, the future, we should acknowledge first that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. There are reformers who have come before us, and we need to remember how much we have to learn from them. I'd like to just give you one example. There is a brilliant educator named Debbie Mayer who told this story, and if I may take the liberty of repeating her story. She was running a school, an innovative small school, also in Harlem, and the school administrator, secretary, I don't know what the title was, came to her in the middle, she was in the middle of a teacher meeting, and said, the central office is on the line. They need to know what is our bell schedule. Well, a bell schedule, that's education talk for, you know, the beginning and end of every class, a bell goes off. But she was an innovator, and she didn't believe that kids should listen to a chiming bell. It was a relic of the origins of education when schools were modeled after factories, so it was like a factory bell, and one of her innovations was to get rid of the bells. So she said, tell them we don't have a bell schedule. So the woman went away, she went back to her meeting, she comes back again, she says, they won't leave me alone. They said they must know our bell schedule. She said, explain the philosophy, explain why we don't do this. You know, maybe if you go more in depth, they'll understand. So she goes back, does that, comes back again. She said, this is the Office of Compliance downtown at the Department of Ed. They must know our bell schedule. She said, tell them it's every hour on the hour. The end. What she was doing that really represents what education reform used to be like is she was fighting a compliance bureaucracy. The education reformers who came before our generation had to fight this enormous bureaucracy that was all centered on compliance. And it evolved over time, I believe, based on an underlying premise that teachers can't be trusted. So we have to build all sorts of rules and design curriculum from a central office and tell everybody what to do. And that's how it was for a very long time. That very same premise, that idea that you can't really trust teachers, that lasted throughout the years. In fact, I remember 10 years ago when I was visiting schools and doing research before opening our first school, I remember visiting a school where they had a curriculum that was so scripted. It was proven to teach kids, but it was scripted. So the teacher would sit for 2.5 hours and read off a script, and then the kid said something, and the teacher said something, the kid said something, and the teacher said something. No creativity, no use of one's own brain. And I went to the principal afterwards. I said, tell me about this program. Why do you use it? I didn't want to insult her. I didn't think it was a kind of a program that I would want in my own children's school. So I just said, tell me why. She said, well, because it's teacher-proof. It's the first time I ever heard that term. I said, what do you mean? What is teacher-proof? She said, well, we can't fire bad teachers. So when you have a curriculum that is designed, scripted in this way, even she wasn't very respectful about it. She said even the dumbest person could carry it out. So this is where we were. And we've come a very long way since then. I think that what we have accomplished in the last 10 years is that we've realized that you can attract the best people if you are willing to create accountability, and accountability is the underlying premise. However, I'm a little bit concerned about the direction of education reform right now, and that's hence the title of this talk, Reforming Education Reform. I think what we are doing is replacing a compliance bureaucracy with an evaluation bureaucracy. And that is based on that same underlying premise that you can't trust teachers. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a teacher you can't trust, it's like having a babysitter you can't trust, do not let that person near your child. I don't care how many rules there are, how many scripted curricula. If you don't trust someone to be a high-quality educator, they should not be in the classroom. And so the question is, how do we reform education reform? What do I mean by that? And there are 3 things that I have in mind. The first is we need to shift from this mentality of teacher evaluation, which I think we've really overdone, to teacher ownership. We need to shift our thinking. Now, just let me be clear. Of course, teachers need to be held accountable. But if every system and everybody's focus is all around evaluating teachers, as if that's the answer, we will never get there. Instead, what we should be obsessed with is teacher ownership. What do I mean by that? When you own something, when you own a store, a little pharmacy, or your own anything, you are accountable for the results because it's yours, and you have complete freedom. It's yours, you own it. So ownership is 2 things. It's accountability and freedom. It's actually the essence of charter schools, but it is also the way all schools need to run. Because if you give teachers ownership over what they do, they will be on fire, and we see it in our schools every day. Peter Drucker, who I really admire, and he was, as many of us know, the guru of modern management, wrote a book right around the time I was thinking about opening a school, a little over 10 years ago, called Management Challenges for the 21st Century. And Peter Drucker said that the conditions that inspire and make productive knowledge workers are completely different than the conditions that you need for productivity among manual laborers. Specifically, that you must empower knowledge workers. And if you tell them exactly what to do, and this I thought was such a profound insight that he brought, if you tell a person exactly what to do, they will never improve. I thought that was so interesting. And of course, teachers are the consummate knowledge workers. And so we should be obsessed with how do you give teachers ownership, because when somebody owns something, when it is theirs, they are lit up every day. And that's what you see in our schools. When people come to our schools, the one thing they say all the time at Harlem Village Academies is, your teachers are so passionate. They're so driven. They're dedicated. Yes, because it's theirs. Of course, we work in charter schools where there is complete accountability. So we're able to give them that freedom and that trust. The second way in which I feel we have to reform education reform has to do with testing. I think we have to increase the quality and decrease the quantity of testing. I'll give you an example from one of my own children. One of my daughters, I have a boy and 2 girls, one of my daughters came home after a week of school and told me how she didn't like science. She was taking an AP science course, and I said, what are you talking about? You love science. She said, this class is so boring. All we're doing is memorizing terms, memorizing information. It's just, I don't like science anymore. That was really sad for me as a mother. And a couple days later, she came home and said, we had the most amazing class in science today. I said, wow, maybe it's gotten better. She said, no, the teacher was absent. We had a sub. And it was the honors science teacher instead of the AP. And we did an experiment, and we were talking about, what we were discovering on our own, and we went outside, and then we wrote it up. And I said, wow, this is great. You're only in the 2nd week, so switch classes. This is fantastic. I'm so happy for you. She said, what are you talking about, Mom? I can't switch. I said, of course you can. You switch from AP to honors. Mom, I have to take APs to get into college. There is no way I'm switching. And I tried to convince her, no, it's more important to, to learn and to be. You don't understand, Mom. And how sad is it that as a society, this is what we have taught our children, and that they are presented that the highest level class you can take is a class where you have to memorize a bunch of stuff, and that's what matters. And so we've got to reform our approach to testing. Of course, you need some testing, but we're overdoing it, and we're focusing on the wrong things, and we need to look to the people who came before us, because we do stand on the shoulders of giants. People like Ted Sizer, who have a lot of information that somehow isn't getting out there into the education reform debate and dialogue nationally. I feel like educators are somehow missing from that national dialogue. The third way that we should reform education reform, I feel like it's time to rethink the purpose of schooling itself, to really think deeply. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard the words success and competition at education conferences. And let me tell you, when my children were little, I did not look at them and think to myself, one day when you're older, my deepest hope for you is that you will be able to compete with China. What do we want for our children? What do we want our schools to do as partners to us as parents in raising and educating our children? We need to think carefully about our vision. And when I think about what I wanted as a mother when my children were growing up, I wanted them to be intellectually sophisticated. I wanted them to be avid readers. I wanted them to be fiercely independent thinkers. I wanted them to be wholesome in character. And most of all, my deepest desire is that I wanted them to be compassionate. I bet you, most of you, and most of the parents in my schools want the same things for their children. And so what are we doing to make sure that our schools help provide that? I ask you to get involved, whether it's here in Chicago or wherever you are from. Get involved in the debate and help us bring education reform to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.